I'll show you how to make this guard now using machinery and equipment. The machinery will do all the hard work for us and the finishing will be much higher quality as well as much quicker. We've got our pair of rear guards here that have been laser cut and etched. We'll be following our forming instructions from drawing 15, using machinery and equipment to wheel, swage, fold, shrink and stretch. This is our 1-inch wide wheeling machine. I've got a 5-inch lower radius in the bottom. I'll be wheeling only within these laser etched marks of our swage lines. So it's just through this section that I'll need to wheel. We're creating a very slight crown, only 1 to 2 millimeters of crown in that piece. I've set the clearance from my bottom die to the top die. Basically, it's 1/10 of a millimeter less clearance than our material. Our material is 1 mil or 0.95, so we're looking for a 0.85 millimeter roughly gap. You'll know because as you start wheeling it, you'll feel the pressure, you'll feel the resistance. So we'll just start the process. It's such a long piece, what I'm going to do is single passes and then re-enter from the back side of the machine. Our contact point where we're actually wheeling is in the middle of the lower wheel and the middle of the top wheel. So when you're wheeling to the edge of our laser etched marks, make sure your contact is lining up or close to where we've got our laser etched swage lines that we'll be using later. As you pass through every time, just come across a few millimeters so that way you're creating a stretch point. You can see the shadow lines where it's becoming polished. So as we work our way across, we stop here and that will do us as far as our wheeling. Try and keep your tracking lines close to each other, just a few millimeters apart. You can see in the light, don't open them up, don't spread them apart, otherwise what will happen is you'll create a corrugated surface when you feel across that way. The reason we're doing this is we're pre-stretching for a step later. What happens after we swage, we shrink, we'll form the radius. This will become concave instead of convex. So pre-stretching gives a memory a little bit of, gives a metal a little bit of memory. So later on, when we re-wheel with a 2-inch radius die, it will be much quicker to form. This piece that we've used our 5-inch lower wheel on now has a slight crown in it. So the side effect of wheeling is you do get additional shape in 2 directions. Number 1, across the surface we will create a high point, but we're also stretching the material with a lower wheel contact area of about 1 or 2 millimeters. So when we pull this flat, that is a true indication of how much radius we've got. We're up to step 2 in our process. It's going to be folding. We need to turn the piece upside down and transfer the marks that are in 15 millimeters from the outside edge on both sides, because we'll be folding the outside flanges up. We've finished our folding, now we're up to our swage. With our laser etched parts, you can see the swage line. There's an inner and an outer. To do that, we're using our 1/8 step dies with a 0 offset, so the front face is flush. With the top shaft, you can adjust it in or out. With our 1/8 step, it's obviously 3 millimeters. We'll also be using our backstop to make sure this runs parallel and lines up with our laser etched marks. Speaking of which, highlight, if you need to, the radiuses on each corner, because they can be quite difficult to see. You can also use an LED light, attach it to the machine, Make sure you're projecting enough light in there so that you can see it clearly. When you set your depth, you need to make sure the depth is approximately 2 to 3 millimeters, hence 1/8 step dies. Also, as we get to the end, slow your machine down, release on the backstop and spin it around at the ends. Then it will reset, bring your backstop in, and we keep going until it's finished. I've set the machine up now. I've also done a few test pieces just to make sure I've got the right closing width between the dies, clearances. We've also made sure that I've set the correct speed control to do the ends. Give yourself a good few test runs if you've never done it before. So just practice enough until you get confident. And again, make sure you've got enough light so that you can clearly see it. Release your backstop. Turn your speed down. Now, another point here is, apart from your speed, you'll also need to, because it's quite a tight radius, you'll have to come on and off the foot control. So, press down, inch forward, off. So you'll see me go stop, start, and then this will gradually spin around and we'll work our way around progressively. Don't rush it, take your time. You can see here on the ends, the lower die has just flared out our side walls. So what we'll have to do later on is come in, close it up, etc. Even if you've run off there slightly, you can always go over it and redo it. So now we bring our backstop in again, up against this back face. Then what we can do, increase our speed, and we'll be finishing on the home straight. I'm just going to inch it forward again, just to give myself a good clear. I've got to get away from this flange where it's just flared out slightly. Now you can actually see that it's really on that etched line. Just apply a little bit of downwards pressure to the panel, otherwise it twists. So try and keep the panel horizontal. Don't let it twist in your hand or roll. That's it, it's done. The next step is we need to create our curve, our stretch and shrink. We'll be using our forming buck. First thing we'll have to do is, with our seaming pliers, just put a slight 25-degree fold in the very back edge of our guard. That will form a location point that we can continually reference against on the forming buck. For this application, we're using bench-mounted shrinkers and stretchers. The process of shrinking, the serrated jaws under load leverage will pull the metal together, creating a convex curve. Stretching is the opposite. The jaws will pull apart, creating a concave surface. Later we'll be doing more complex form, shapes, radiuses, and we'll be using these round jaw shrinkers and stretchers. These are the round jaw shrinkers and stretchers. They give us the capability of doing everything required on this job. For example, this tight radius won't be applicable to a flat jaw or rectangular face shrinker and stretcher. It won't fit in there. It will actually crush it. This will also do our radius through here. It will do through the nose, and later when we're making our front valance, this radius also fits in there quite nicely. And more complex pieces such as our inner guard here, where it's got multiple curvature, this will fit really nicely where we've got a radius and a concave face that we have to use shrinkers and stretchers. Now we're ready to fold across the back. Like I said, a slight angle, about 25 degrees, simply so it locates across the back of our forming buck and we continually fit it in the same spot. We can see this area here is concave. We need to work out where the transition is between concave and convex. Concave is where we will put a straight edge up against it, and where it stops being concave or hollow through here is where the transition area is. And where our texture mark is, that is where we stop our stretching. And it's the same on both sides. So we need to mark both sides, because we'll do a little bit of stretching through here 2-3 times, then we'll progress to the other side. We'll do the same 2 or 3 stretches, trial fit it back onto the forming buck until it's a nice snug fit. The other thing we could do is introduce a profile gauge. Using the profile gauge, we would then match the profile gauge up against our concave section until it's the same shape both sides. I've taken the shrinkers and stretchers out of the vise. Now we've converted it from a hand operated machine to a foot operated machine. So I can actually move from one side to the other very quickly. We also, using the foot, speed up the process. It really assists us in doing the job quickly and efficiently. This mark here that we've taken from the forming buck is the limit of where we stretch. So don't go beyond here. We must keep it just in the tail section, and don't forget we've got to do both sides equally. Okay, you can start to see how it's beginning to curve. Just a quick note, do not stretch on the same point twice, and do not overload it. Otherwise, it splits the metal. It will literally rip it apart if you're not careful with it. So take your time, be patient, and try not to force it too much. So just a little bit more. You can see here, this is our transition area where we go from concave stretch to convex shrink. Don't forget, mark the other side. So we'll begin the process of shrinking up here now. Work in sequence. If you do 3 or 4 shrinks on one side, do exactly the same on the other side. Here's a good example. We've shrunk one side. This side has not been shrunk. So you can see it's developed a twist in it. There, that's removed the twist from it. Now this radius and this radius are almost matched. And you can see that we've started the process. Just continually work your way around. Always check your radiuses against each other. Make sure that you're not putting a twist in the piece, otherwise later on that will cause us problems. So you can see as soon as it starts to pull away from the forming buck, we still need more shrinking through here. You can see the old witness mark here. That will give us a very clear guideline as to where we require more shrinking. You can see in the space of a few minutes that this is really starting to work quite quickly. So remember, don't be too aggressive on your stretching, otherwise it'll split the metal. Don't be too aggressive on your shrinking, otherwise it'll kink. And later on, you'll have to solve all those problems, or you've got to start again. Continue to check your left and your right sides, making sure that you don't have a twist in your piece. Always make sure that you're working in sequence to each other, left and a right side, and continue to check on your forming buck. Be patient at this part. Don't be too aggressive and don't rush it. You've spent a lot of time developing this piece. If you go too quick and you're not systematic, you can damage it. Ultimately, you may have to throw it in the bin if you're not patient. All right, so this is good here. And then it's really sort of this area right there. You can see where it's rocking. That's where it requires a little bit more shrinking, just through here and here. Right before it was sort of seesawing, it was pivoting through here. You can see here we have a very good fit. There's no movement. From this area forward is where we need to continue shrinking until we get a nice solid fit. It's not twisted and it's not rocking or seesawing. So we'll continue shrinking through here equally on both sides. If this radius is not the same as that radius, we can also use our profile gauge as a reference to check it from one side to the other to make sure they're symmetrical. And yep, so now it's saying we need to continue. You can see where it's literally rocking or seesawing. It's just here, forward of where I previously marked. Yep, so now we're up here. So it hasn't taken long to progress from this area to this area. See how that's got a slight twist in it? So this side here has a little bit more radius than here. So we need to just go back and do a little bit of a shrink through there. You can actually see where there's a very slight difference in the cross section. At this point, it's very easy to fall into a trap of sequentially racing down there, then flipping it over and doing the same. What will happen is you will find it quite difficult to then come back and problem solve to rectify things that have been overshrunk or overstretched, etc. So to rectify it is a more time-consuming process than systematically working your way along. Okay, so what that's telling me through here is we need to shrink right there. There we go. That's got a slight rock in it again, but what we'll do, I'll make this really obvious. So lock it and then transfer that to the other side. We can see there, it's probably got a little bit too much curvature, a little bit too tight through there. So we just need to stretch that a tiny little bit. That's all it took. It's just a very slight adjustment as you go. Don't try and problem solve it later, otherwise you're going to be chasing in multiple areas and it becomes quite frustrating. The other thing that can happen on the process is you may lose patience with it. Again, don't rush the process and be quite systematic how you go about doing it. Just so I get it in the right spot, what I usually do is when I shrink this side, I'll hold my finger there, or with a marking pen, highlight the area that you've done. Make sure when you flip it over, that's the same spot on the other side. Again, always referencing the back edge so that we're continually aligning to a common point. So it's just a nice slip-on fit. Okay, so right from here you can see the radius there. That's where it goes straight, so we need to continue shrinking just in this area. We've just got this last 50mm, 60mm section to go, and then we're done. Yep, you can see that's fitting a bit closer now. Yep. Notice that I'm just using a nylon mallet to make adjustments, and it doesn't leave any marks in that face. If you use a steel hammer or a ball peen hammer, an engineer's hammer, you will leave marks in there, and that will have to be fixed later. There we go. So that's it. It's pretty much fitting the forming buck now. So the next step in the process is to finish the back end, dress the sides, planish smooth. Then what we'll have to do at a later stage is a test or trial fit with this, the guard, the car. So I always get components or parts to a 90% finished stage prior to trial fitting. Then we do the final stages of fitting and finishing at the very last. We've finished our first guard. We can now move on to make the second guard, exactly the same process and procedure. Then what we'll do is we'll do the tails or the back ends of the guards together. We're going to cut, weld and finish these next. Using the dome end of the nylon hammer or tinsman's mallet, what we'll do is apply a little bit of downwards pressure and just stress relieve the corners. You see how that sits down? What it's doing is the timber buck is actually acting as a dolly, and it's pushing it down, so it's rectifying where this wasn't quite aligned. Then we can proceed to finish the ends off and fold and cut. Back to our cross peen planishing hammer, the one with the flatter face, not the dome faced hammer. We then will be using our angle dolly. Supporting underneath the area where we're going to work will help close these gaps up. Then what we can do with our hammer and dolly is we can start to use the dolly to form or roll the edge in. Where it overlaps, you simply go along with a hacksaw, cut the overlap, and then we'll MIG weld. We can see here we've got our radius. We'll address that as something later that we'll finish with hand tools. So instead we'll go from a square cut to a radius edge, just simply using hand tools. The end is almost ready to weld now. So what we've done is close everything up, cut our overlap. We can then weld. We'll finish it as in sanding, a little bit of a radius, mark our excess, cut the excess, and we'll be doing that to both guards. We're back from welding now. The next thing we'll do is sand our welds on both sides. Then we'll mark the excess metal on the tail of the guard, trim it with tin snips. We'll do a little bit of dressing to smooth out the irregularities or lumps and bumps. Then we can sand this, and the next stage is to make the mounting bracket. Just one quick word of note. This material is 1 mil thick. So when you're sanding or grinding or filing anything, just remember, when you're doing this process, you've got to be very gentle with it because it won't take much and you'll literally burn sand, grind through this edge, particularly on the corner. So you can see here, there's no blue tinge, there's no heat marks in it. Therefore, I'm not pushing very hard. Let the machine do the work and just lightly skim it. If you go too hard, you will end up having to replace that corner section because there's no metal left. This now needs to be sanded with 80 or 120 grit. Then what we've got to do is just a little bit of panel beading dressing to smooth all these ripples and ridges out of both sides. A little bit of sanding. Then what we can do is go on to making our mounting brackets.